Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. It's William Holland here live in New York. Today's guest is Manika Premsingh. She runs Orbis Economics. It's a Delhi research-based economics firm, clearly one of the better industries in India. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have you back. It's been a while. We have to keep in contact more often. There's certainly a growth-led strategy out of India, and it is really no longer really concerned in an emerging market. Let's run through some of the indices. Thank you so much for coming back.
So as far as India is concerned, we have seen some improvement in broad indicators in the past 1 year. Growth numbers are looking slightly better, partly also because of the revision in the base, but also from the last quarter to this quarter, and the numbers were released earlier in the week. There has been a slight uptick in growth to about 7.4%.
Wow.
That said, there are a number of real indicators that are not looking as good. For instance, industrial production is still slightly weak. Investment cycle hasn't taken off. Our trade numbers are not that great. However, that being said, there are a number of positives as well. For instance, our external economy in terms of the current account deficit as well as the inflows of foreign investment are looking very strong. The current account deficit has, of course, improved partly because of the drop in the oil prices. And the FDI inflows have definitely improved because the kind of policy decisions that have been taken, as well as a more stable government. So this year we are actually at Orbis Economics expecting FDI inflows to cross 50 billion, which will be the highest ever for India. We have the numbers till about September so far, which is at about 25 billion. So another 6 months to go, we will very comfortably add another 25 billion. So that is a strong positive. The government finances are looking very much in check. In fact, capital spending has been front-loaded, which is a positive because it's not just about keeping the fiscal deficit in place. It is also about ensuring that the quality of spending is on the higher side, and capital spendings normally take a backseat, but this time that has not been the case. Going forward, also, we are anticipating a number of positive developments to take place, one of them being an uptick in consumption on account of the recently announced seventh pay commission by the government, which is going to have a marginal impact on the overall consumption spending. Inflation is also down, so that also kind of promotes overall ability for consumers to consume more.
I have to tell you,
We are in a positive place as far as India is concerned. We still have some way to go. The corporates particularly are feeling the heat. Corporate numbers corporate results are very bad still, but hopefully things will improve.
I have to tell you, your economic fundamentals might be trending down, but I have to tell you, overall, your operating environment there is fantastic. That's not the same here in the United States. Everyone's balance sheet looks good, but there's nothing going on, which means there's a divorce between Main Street and Wall Street. It may be not something that India has, but your economic fundamentals and your operating environment is trending properly. I have to tell you, your central banker, I know you told me he's from the University of Chicago, which means he's a monetarist. And for our listeners, that means he's interested in monitoring the money supply relative to inflation. Rajan is his name. He said, and I think this is a great news agenda, he said, look, India is not China. We're not going to be picking certain industries and playing industries off one another. Just for the record, India has the rule of law. It's politically stable. It has a very sound bond market. And Rajan had said that an export push strategy like China, which really had it has a disastrous social implication in China. He also said that they were going to try to get some kind of a unified market on taxation. Most Americans read about black money, dark money. Modi was doing nothing other than trying to unify a very archaic tax code. But by mimicking China's export-led growth, your central banker has been explicit that that wouldn't help India. That's good news for you.
Well, India has historically not been an export-led economy. Of course, we have seen China doing very well from purely the economics perspective, from purely the growth perspective,
Right.
because of its export-led strategy. But that said, what is true for China need not be true for
Right.
India. Historically, we have also not had a strength in manufacturing. Of course, there is this is a policy concern that industry is still rather small in comparison to overall GDP, or as a ratio of overall GDP, and there is significant scope to improve that, particularly insofar as we have a labor surplus which needs to be absorbed across industries. Does that mean that these industries, particularly manufacturing, needs to be export-led? Maybe it does not need to be the only out-and-out strategy. India has a very strong consumption market, a very strong domestic market as well. The positive about exports is that in a globalized world, it expands the reach, and it also various country cycles can play off against each other. So if there is a recessionary condition in India and it's not as bad outside, then growth there might be a hedge to growth therefore, and vice versa. So there are positives as well as negatives to having an export-led strategy. At the same time, India is not a manufacturing base in any case, and it will take a lot of thinking, a lot of political will, and a lot of on-the-ground implementation to ensure that India does in fact become a hub if it has to.
Just very quickly, the United States has an identical problem. I've been reading how Modi, your prime minister, who really is doing an incredible foreign relations job, he's kind of faltering on labor market reforms. Now, I have to tell you, the Federal Reserve in the United States has cut its teeth on the Phillips curve. This nonsense that there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Paul Volcker says it never existed. It's a silly little ideological template. What most people do not understand about India, it is a continent. And just like the United States, there's going to be regional disparities. And having an export-led strategy would not service the interests. I mean, you've got Chennai, which is an education hub. You've got Mumbai, which is clearly involved in equities and commodities. You have regional disparities, but
Yes.
the United States has it too. So I'm wondering if the central bank mandate out of New Delhi is correct. There's a big argument over should they have price stability. In my view, there's never been a trade-off between the Phillips curve, between inflation and unemployment. Clearly, there needs to be some kind of tax symmetry, but I think a lot of people are getting ahead of themselves by indicating that a lack of labor market reform, that Modi's got to move quicker. This is a massive country. This is a continent, and it's not going to turn on a dime. Very quickly, there is an awful lot of print on the honeymoon being over for your prime minister. And I just want to check on this very briefly. He's polling quite well. I know he's traveling around. He's done over 29 foreign trips in 16 months. So this guy's like Pope John Paul II. He's never home. How is he keeping? How is he received by Indian citizens?
When you say that the honeymoon period is over, I think and that is a term that is the phrase that comes up occasionally. And that comes up because of the kind of expectations with which the government came into power, right?
Right.
And it came in with a lot of hope. But the fact of the matter is that if an economy is in a recessionary cycle, there is as much that any government or central bank can do to bring it to recovery and then to boom. I mean, he doesn't have a magic pill. Nobody has a magic pill. There are steps that need to be taken, and it is only over time that that growth will begin to pick up. That said, there have been question marks raised about some of the programs that are announced. Specifically, when we speak about programs like Digital India or Skill India or Made in India, which are great programs on paper, but we need to see more implementation as far as they are concerned. And here I'd like to give you the example of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, which is the financial inclusion scheme of the government, which has done tremendously well. And they have been able to bring lakhs and crores of people under the ambit of financial inclusion who did not even have a bank account. They are extending that to the Mudra Yojana, which they have actually already done that,
Right.
which is to give out loans to small entrepreneurs to ensure that production on the ground, investment on the ground starts taking place. So these are extremely concrete and good steps. In that said, some of the other programs, they are good programs, but they will take their time in order to start bearing fruit. A program like Make in India, for instance, which aims at creating massive employment, increase in manufacturing, improvement in industries. That doesn't happen in a day.
Right, and I think journalists sometimes just have to write something. The guy was elected recently. He's got a continent that's not going to move quickly. Look, the United States has a very serious problem. We have a central bank that's archaic. We also have leadership in the central bank that's being constrained by Congress. So there's a very good fight going on. Clearly, the central bank in the United States is out of ammunition. It's going to have to return to its roots regarding a decentralized political mandate. I'm looking at your prime minister. He's done 29 trips in 16 months. He's got a uranium deal with Australia, $75 billion infrastructure investment accord with United Arab Emirates. And everyone's saying that his domestic policy agenda is faltering. I think we have to take a look at this through a longer time frame. He has a very large agenda, and his political class in New Delhi has to learn to support him. Does he have the support of his political class?
As far as political support is concerned, the monsoon session, very poetically actually, was a complete washout. The monsoon session of the parliament. There was very little that happened in terms of passing legislations. However, in the coming months, we should see some activity, particularly on account of the goods and services tax, which will be a feather in the cap of the NDA government if it is able to push through it, because that actually implies a uniformity in taxation across states, or at least the first steps towards a uniformity across states, which is actually what you were earlier referring to as well, as far as regional differences are concerned. It goes a long way in making a unified market if the rules and regulations that are followed across states are the same. And that is also a huge step in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of procedural procedural simplicity.
Right.
So that is something to look forward for sure. A lot has happened. A number of steps have been taken. But I think what is really the challenge is the mismatch between the expectations and what has happened on the ground. I think that's really...
My last question for you, and I'll let you add in whatever you like. In your view, is your agricultural sector the primary input driving India's inflation?
Well, food prices tend to be rather volatile. If we look at the consumer price index, which is the headline index that we look at, that has about half of the index is accounted for by food and food products. So yes, it is a big mover, and given the kind of volatility that we see in the food price index, it also accounts for the spikes or lows that we might see. Of course, fuel impacts, housing impacts, services inflation impacts, but food, of course, has a major role to play,
But
for
you've
sure.
got incredible FDI, and you've got a wonderful rule of law. And I have to tell you, I watched your prime minister being really welcomed here in New York and Brazil, even in Israel. The Indians are really here to stay, and unlike communist Beijing, most people, certainly here in the United States, really look forward to the opening and the flourishing of India. We've had great bilateral relations. India's been put in a very bad position relative to its borders regarding Islam, but primarily the United States sees India as not just a counterweight to Beijing, but a great friend and a great export leader. Manika Premsingh, Orbis Delhi research-based economics firm, a boutique firm dealing with research in economics in New Delhi. Thank you so much for coming on. We do have to have you back on.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah,
Thanks for coming on. All right, bye-bye.
thank you.